Sadhguru Jagi Vasudev is a realized master, mystic, and yogi. He has shown the way for people to attain to their natural joy and to live life with experience from one's own inner nature. His presence is filled with grace and compassion. Sadhguru's scientific approach towards spirituality and work towards the upliftment of humanity have received accolades worldwide. The words that come from him in intensity and utmost clarity, from his deep understanding and wisdom, can change the very core of the being. Belonging to no particular tradition, Sadhguru incorporates what is most valid for the modern person from the spiritual sciences. His work, an outpouring of his blissfulness, finds expression in the form of a ceaseless offering to help all beings. Available to all who are willing, Sadhguru's life is an invitation to the divine through individual transformation. Welcome to the silent revolution of self-realization.
Sadhguru, the Shastras talk elaborately about the virtues required of a woman. What
Shastras? You're talking about Shastras.
What are these virtues according to you?
What virtues Shastras describe or demand out of a woman were pertaining to a certain time in history. This tradition has allowed this, that there are two dimensions to the teaching, Shrutis and Smrutis. One is eternal, unchanging, another should be constantly evolved from generation to generation. So going by virtues or moral codes which were prescribed thousands of years ago may be just out of place today. But the basic virtue for any human being, whether it's a man or a woman, I don't see separate virtues for men and women. The basic virtue for any human being is to be true to himself. When somebody is really true to himself, then functioning in the world is just a question of adjustment. Adjusting to the situations that we have chosen to live. What is virtue? Only when you're truly empty, you're virtuous. Otherwise, if you are mind, you're never virtuous. Only when you're no more mind, you can be virtuous. Your ideas of virtue, if you do this, it's virtue, if you do not do that, it is something else. This is not life virtue, this is social virtue. Society's virtues are different, they serve the society. Life virtues serve life. I am somebody who serves life, not the society. So my virtues are of life. And the only true virtue or the virtue which allows you… Virtue means that which takes you beyond in a certain way. The only thing that can take you beyond is if you are no more a limited being, if you are a vast emptiness within you, every thought that you get, every emotion that you get, every feeling that you have you're not really associated with it. You have all those things, but you are not that. That's virtue. When you're no more a bundle of thoughts or emotions or opinions or sensations, then you are perfectly virtuous. If you're identified with your sensations or your thoughts or your emotions or your opinions, then you cannot be virtuous because you'll be biased with life. If you're truly virtuous, you must be beyond all bias. When you're identified with something, either the body or the mind or the emotion, there cannot be any virtue. Now, for example, is Veerappan a virtuous man? You know, Veerappan, is he a virtuous man? Today he is a criminal. Everybody is wanting to have him dead. But do you know, in Tamil Nadu, one of the greatest titles that used to be conferred to great heroes in the past was one who has slain 1,000 elephants, means it is like Paramvir Chakra. Veerappan has slain almost 500, 600. He's close to becoming the greatest Tamilian ever isn't it? So, our values and virtues have changed. Today if you kill 1,000 elephants, you are a criminal who has to be put to death. But 1,000 years ago, if you killed 1,000 elephants, you were the hero of the highest order. So society's virtues are biased against life. When you are not identified with anything, you will be absolutely virtuous. When you're not identified with anything, only then you are truly capable of compassion. When you're identified, you can only be biased. When you're compassionate, you're always virtuous. People being sympathetic to certain causes or certain people is not compassion. When you're passionate about everything, when your passion has become all-encompassing, then you're compassionate. Compassion is not little pity or sympathy for something. When your passion encompasses everything, you're compassionate. Compassion is the highest virtue in a way, and compassion is not possible if you're identified with this or that. Only when you're able to just look at life as life, only then you can be compassionate. If you look at it as my life or your life, no compassion. When life is just life, there is compassion. There is see, today everything that we do, even the so-called good causes, people who take up good causes are happening with identification. Now that you asked about woman's virtue, now there are women's movements who are trying to set a new set of virtues because they don't like the old ones. New virtues will not be any better. In fact, they're more demanding and killing than the old ones. If a woman transcends her identification with her body, then she will be virtuous. If she is identified with body parts, she cannot be virtuous. When you refer to life as life, it's fine. But when you refer to life either as masculine or feminine, this whole idea has entered you not because you have perceived some other level of duality. The difference in the body parts between a man and woman has entered too deeply into your consciousness that you can't think beyond it. I know everywhere people are talking about women's issues. Women's issues can be talked only on the social level because there has been a certain amount of exploitation and injustice. We can talk about it socially. But individually, there are no women's issues. You should not carry your manhood or womanhood 24 hours of the day, it's not necessary. You can just be a being. Certain times of your life, certain situations in your life, you need to be a man or a woman, that's fine. But rest of the time, why do you want to be identified with a few body parts all the time? If you must be identified with some body part, I would suggest a brain would be better instead of reproductive organs. So there's no separate virtue for women. Virtue is for all human beings, and compassion is always the highest virtue. Compassion means including everything in your passion. When the whole existence is involved in your passion, you're compassionate.
Sadhguru, for a woman who is married, who has her husband and children to take care of, can she pursue a spiritual path? I mean, is it necessary for her? And what I see is that when women start walking on the spiritual path, there is so much fear created in the people around her that she might drop her family.
You mean the woman around her?
Possibly.
Usually.
So how is it possible to manage all this?
So, generally in this culture, there have been more women on the spiritual path than men most of the time. But they carried on their spirituality quietly, in the secrecy of their hearts. That is why, generally for a woman, both for her temperament and for her social situation, what was most suitable was bhakti. So she pursued her bhakti in her heart, nobody in the house need to know. In the secrecy of her heart, it went on. But now, this bhakti movement definitely was more alive in the women of the world than in the men, in terms of numbers, if you take it. But the male bhaktas always became famous. The women who were bhaktas, they couldn't even talk about it except a few, like Akka Mahadevi or Mirabai or somebody who burst forth outside. Others just kept it to themselves. They found it liberating and it was fine. They were not looking to be recognized in any way. Today, we have brought in kriyas, jnana, bhakti, everything into woman's life, which she can very much carry on in her own house. Only karma yoga, she has to move out. Otherwise, all the other three dimensions she can carry on within the house without anybody knowing about it. Except when she does kaka in the morning, little problem, you know. Rest of the sadhana, nobody need to know. So, when the social situation or the family situation is not conducive, if it is not conducive, it's not so for every woman. For some, it is not conducive. If it is so, you just have to handle it tactfully. And that is so for man also. It is not that man is free from it. There are many families where women are stopped from even meditating. There are also many families where men are stopped from meditating. But when a woman is stopped from meditating, she can easily come here and cry before everybody. My husband doesn't allow me to meditate. But if a wife is stopping the husband from meditating, he cannot even cry before everybody, my wife is stopping me from meditating, he will just sit quietly. Once you walk the spiritual path, whether you're a man or a woman, people around you tend to feel insecure and tend to try to stop you. So they try to create some situations, in turn a little bit of suffering because people don't understand and, those unpleasant situations. Once it happened, a women's liberation meeting was going on. One of those hardcore women's lib was going on as to how many ways women are suffering in the world. One small little meek man was sitting in the front row and he raised his hand and said, "I know one way that women have not suffered." This woman libber looked down upon him and said, "Now you tell me, which way is that? Women have suffered every possible way. Now you better tell me." He stood up and said silently, "Women have never suffered silently." When they suffer, they can make a lot of noise about it. When man suffers, he cannot make noise about it because he feels ashamed of that also. He suffers that also. A woman would feel relieved complaining about her situations, that somebody is stopping her from doing something. But a man suffers that sharing also. So, it is not just for a man or a woman. Once you walk the spiritual path, whether you're a man or a woman, people around you, if they are not mature enough, they will get insecure. This insecurity is because suddenly they find you're becoming self-contained, that you seem to be fine by yourself. You don't seem to need somebody else. When you were leaning upon them, they were complaining on it. When you don't lean upon them anymore, they complain about that. And this freedom is scary. And they have heard stories how Gautam Buddha left his child and wife and walked away. It's very much a part of one's growth to look beyond these things, to manage these things tactfully and go beyond that. If the situation is so crude that it is becoming very, maybe sometimes even violent, physically violent, then one has to see what to do about it. Which you anyway look at it, whether this situation comes because of your spiritual sadhana or you want to go to the cinema or whatever. If situations go beyond control, we see how to solve them, isn't it? The same goes for this also. Now, women walking spiritual path, I want you to understand, once you're on the spiritual path, you must forget that you're a woman. You must just look at yourself as life. Once you're on the spiritual path, you must forget that you're either a man or a woman. That's a basic step you have to take. Why? Maybe you still have to play the role of a woman or a man in your family, that's different. But why? Spiritual paths around the world have always encouraged people to take brahmacharya or sannyas, is simply that, to eliminate the duality in your mind. There is something which is playing between the duality. there is something which is absolute. Spiritual path means you're tending to go towards the absolute. If you invest your life in duality, you have to do juggling. See, please understand, if you have a very good marriage means that you have a very good juggler. You're juggling. If you don't juggle properly, they fall down here and there. By the time you pick up one ball, the others fall down, you know? You know, people who are juggling 4 or 5 balls at a time, if one falls down, by the time you pick this up, everything falls down. So, once you invest your life with the identification of the duality, juggling is inevitable, you have to juggle. You have chosen to juggle. Spiritual path or no spiritual path, juggling is every day, isn't it? How capable you are is how well you manage the situation. So this juggling did not enter your life because of the spiritual path. This juggling entered your life because you invested in the identification of being identified with the dualities of life. So marriage is an investment in duality. So once you've made an investment, you can't throw it away. You have to see it to some extent. To whatever extent you feel is relevant, to that extent you have to see it through. So, people around you bothering you, but unfortunately, in most homes, at least in the Indian homes, I think, it's the woman, the other woman in the family who are the biggest problem, isn't it? Generally it is so. So what I'm telling you is the problem is not because you're a man or a woman. The problem is just that you're doing something by yourself without involving other people. So it's best you enroll all of them for yoga program. It's best that the whole family is walking the spiritual path. Then it'll be easier. But it may not be always possible. So then we have to juggle.
Some female spiritual leaders have said that it is better for a woman to seek a female guru. Is it so?
It's better. They say that? Okay. Now, one thing, if you're still a female or a male, it means you're not yet spiritual. And especially if you're still seeing a guru as a male or as a female, you have no possibility. You are still not able to disidentify yourself with your body parts, it's okay. If you're still identifying your guru also with his body parts or her body parts, then you just don't know what it is. This is coming from absolute ignorance. This is a reaction to thousands of years of being downtrodden. Socially may be correct, spiritually not relevant. If you look at your guru either as a man or a woman, you'll miss the whole point.
You have talked about Kriya Yoga being a path for the tough people. Are there any women Kriya Yogis on the path?
Women?
Women Kriya Yogis on the path?
There have been, but very few, because Kriya Yoga demands a certain extreme sense of discipline and perseverance at certain stages of its sadhana. Generally, it's not that it's not possible, but generally, women did not choose Kriya Yoga because they don't like that kind of hardship. It is not necessary that Kriya Yoga should mean hardship, no. But biologically, a woman is slightly disadvantaged when it comes to Kriya Yoga. Not essentially so, but to a certain extent she is disadvantaged. But what I have seen and known is the general Kriya Yoga that was taught was mostly designed for a male because most of the practitioners were male. See, suppose all the people here who come to us are only 3 feet height. All the people who come to Isha Yoga Center are only 3 feet height. What will we do? We'll build a door which is only 3.5 feet tall, because everybody can come in comfortably with that. Only tomorrow when a 6 foot tall person comes, a problem arises. Till then there is no problem. So generally, only men walk the path of Kriya Yoga because it involved a certain discipline and it involved a certain taking away from the normal situations of life, which was not possible at all in this culture for a woman, because by the time she was 8 or 9, she was married. By the time she was 15, she had a child. So the question of she going into such atmospheres which Kriya Yoga demands was not available. So traditionally, it got established like Kriya Yoga means it's for men only. Not because yoga is of that nature, because social conditions were of that nature. So all the practices that were designed and structured by various masters were all male-oriented because their disciples were male. Accordingly, they structured the processes. This does not mean no woman has walked Kriya Yoga path, no, many have, but they were a very small minority. So not too many practices were designed for them. But the systems that we have structured here are suitable for women also. They're doing well with their practices. So can a woman walk Kriya Yoga? Yes, she can. But if she wants to walk Kriya as 100% path, she's slightly disadvantaged. She's come with a little handicap. So she needs little extra effort if she's willing to do that. But it's always best if one wants to progress, to mix all aspects of life, to create a proper combination of these 4 dimensions of jnana, karma, kriya and bhakti. And in a woman generally, the emotional dimension in him, in her is more dominant than other dimensions. It's good to make use of that. Why give up an advantage and take up a handicapped position? It's better to make use of the advantages that she has. What I see is, if she has a little bit of bhakti in her, then her kriyas just get fired up so easily. If she has no bhakti in her, to move her energies with kriya becomes very difficult for a lot of women. So it's better to make use of that. A man would be more comfortable generally. This is not 100%. Generally, what you refer to as masculine is more comfortable with jnana and kriya and karma. A woman is more comfortable with bhakti and kriya as a combination rather than jnana and kriya as a But that's not true with every woman or every man. It people, oscillate between the two. We are offering Kriya Yoga to women, we are not making any distinction. But if people raise to a certain pitch of practice, then I would also prescribe different types of practices for men and women. Because certain practices which have come traditionally are not suitable for women. It will not be conducive for their biology. To get into such practices, it will disturb the system. So accordingly, a practice can be structured. It is not that the masters of the past did not want to create practices for women. They did not because there were no women among them, that's all.
Dear Sadhguru, many spiritual leaders have prohibited women from wearing Rudraksha. But here I see many women also wearing Rudraksha. How is this?
Because there are no spiritual leaders here. You need to understand this. If survival is a very dominant factor in our lives right now, then naturally man dominates the situation. If physical situations, social situations are not well established, if there is strife and physical threat all the time, then naturally man will dominate because physically, physiologically, he's better equipped to handle survival on the physical level. But once societies are well established, when survival is not the big issue, when we are looking at finer aspects of life, there will be no distinction between man and woman. And unfortunately, the so-called spiritual leaders always wants to keep the strife in the society on for so many reasons. And their understanding probably, I think it's better you withdraw that word spiritual and say religious leaders. I don't think anybody on the spiritual path is resisting that. They are not. Certain religious groups are, because somewhere certain norms were formed when in certain phase of history, when man was all dominant, woman was very subservient. At that time, certain rules were formed. Whoever is dominant, they make the rules according to their convenience, isn't it? Always. Unfortunately, that's been the history of humanity. Whoever is dominant makes rules according to his convenience. Very few people in the world have thought of everybody's well-being, of every creature's well-being. A very small percentage of people, a very small percentage of humanity has thought and felt about every life as themselves and formed norms and rules as it is necessary for everything around them. Otherwise, most humanity has always formed rules as it's convenient for them, not for somebody else. So, what is the big problem between this man and woman? They've just forgotten that they're the same species, that's one big problem. Another problem is, their intelligence is completely hijacked by their hormones. because they cannot look at life just as life. They're so influenced by their hormones that they have to think about the woman all the time. Because they think about the woman all the time and she doesn't let them do anything with their lives, they somehow concluded she must be the devil, not understanding that your intelligence has been hijacked by your own chemistry. So somewhere she bothered man so much that he started thinking, she must be the devil, she won't let me do anything, all the time she's in my mind. And so we started inventing all kinds of impurities in her. One big impurity for which they're saying she should not wear rudrakshis, that she has menstrual cycles. If you don't know this, when your mother bore you, when she was pregnant with you, she had no menstrual cycles. That means that is the stuff you're made of, whether you like it or you don't like it. That's what you're made of, that's what this body is made of. So if she is impure and her menstrual cycles are impure, then unfortunately the whole humanity is impure. So especially if you're impure, you must wear rudraksh to purify yourself.
Sadhguru, what are your views on adultery? How does it affect one spiritually?
If there is no love in your heart, you are anyway an adulteress. For convenience and comfort, if you have given yourself to any aspect of life, not necessarily a man or a woman for that matter, without love in your heart, if you have given yourself to any aspect of life, you are an adulterer, isn't it? So am I against adultery? Yes, in that sense, yes, with every aspect. But if you're talking about what is considered socially as adultery, it is individual, and for every action that you perform, there is a consequence. Most people I know, they are not willing to face the consequences when they come. But without facing consequences, they want to have situations that they enjoy. Then anybody who is not willing to joyfully accept the consequences that come to them for whatever actions they perform, is just a fool. And a fool is somebody who is against himself in so many ways. Anybody who works against himself, anybody who turns himself against himself or herself against herself, what shall we say about them? So, with your actions, if you're turning yourself against yourself, because you do things senselessly, you're not doing things by choice, you're doing things senselessly, simply because you have given in to a certain aspect of your body or your emotion or something, then definitely it's not okay. Because you will bring suffering to yourself. Anything that brings suffering to any human being, especially to himself, is it okay? Anybody who simply goes about bringing suffering to themselves for whatever reason they have, it doesn't make sense, isn't it? I'm not against or for anything. I want you to live sensibly. What makes utmost sense to you, you must do that. Is this wrong, is that wrong? That's not the point. Are you living your life sensibly? That's the question. Or are you a slave of something and trying to find approval from me for some nonsense that you do? No. I have neither approved any action or disapproved any action. As long as you're behaving sensibly about what you're doing. A senseless life is sin, isn't it? If you live sensibly, in a way that Creator will be proud of you, it's fine. If you've just given into either the ways of your body or your emotion or your mind and going against yourself, it's not sensible. So such senselessness, is it wrong? I'm not even saying it's wrong, it's just very limited and stupid. I have never termed anything right or wrong in my life. But anything that's limited and stupid is not worthwhile, that's all. So I would say adultery is not worthwhile. Is it right or wrong? Who am I to pass a judgment on anything about life? I don't pass judgments about life, but it is stupid and limited to do anything which causes suffering to yourself. It is stupid and senseless to give in to something which seems to be everything today and tomorrow it will make you feel like a fool, isn't it? It's stupid to give in to something which makes you think today it's everything and tomorrow morning it makes you look like a fool to yourself, not to somebody else. That is a senseless way to live. You must live in such a way with so much sense that God should be envious of you. If you show such sense, there's no right and wrong with your life. If you don't have such sense, everything is wrong with your life.
You are my perfect mirror, you show me what I'm not. In the endless pit of what once was me, layer and layer you peel off me. The pain it is, but the joy it brings. So thank you for showing me what I'm not, for showing me what I could be.